The sound of glass shattering against the wall barely registered as I stared at my brother, a stranger wearing the face of someone I once knew. His words hung in the air between us, sharp, deliberate, and designed to cut me to the core. I don't owe you anything, Claire. This is my success, my company. You were just along for the ride. The eviction notice in my hand felt heavy, a final punctuation mark on a story that had begun with so much hope. I had given up everything for him, my career, my savings, my relationships, my home. Now, standing amid the wreckage of my sacrificed life, I faced a devastating truth. The person I loved most had become the architect of my undoing. Higher, Claire, push me higher. 7-year-old Thomas squealed with delight as I pushed the swing with all the strength my 10-year-old arms could muster. His laughter brightened the cloudy September afternoon. I'm going to touch the clouds, he declared, his small legs pumping frantically. Not if I get there first, I challenged, rushing to the empty swing beside him. We weren't just siblings, we were explorers, dreamers, believers in infinite possibilities. Our mother watched from a bench, her tired eyes briefly relieved of the worry that had become her constant companion since our father left. She worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Even as a child, I understood the weight she carried. Perhaps that's why Thomas and I clung to each other so fiercely. In a world that had already taught us about loss, we found certainty in each other. I became his protector, his confidant, his cheerleader. He became my purpose. I still remember finding him huddled under his dinosaur-patterned blanket one night, a flashlight illuminating tear tracks on his freckled face. Jimmy said I'm stupid because I couldn't read the board, he confessed. He said I'll never be smart enough to be somebody. I crawled under the blanket with him, creating our own universe where cruel words couldn't reach us. Jimmy doesn't know anything, I said firmly. You're the smartest person I know. You just see the world differently. Thomas had been diagnosed with dyslexia earlier that year. What the teachers didn't know was how brilliantly his mind worked with mechanical problems. While words confused him, machines spoke to him in a language he inherently understood. I think one day you're going to build something amazing, I told him. Something that changes everything. His eyes widened. You really think so? I know so. And I'm going to help you. That night, we made a pact. Thomas would never stop inventing, and I would never stop believing in him. It was a childish promise made under dinosaur sheets, but it became the foundation of our lives. When he created his first real invention, an alarm clock that used vibrations instead of sound, I helped him enter it in the science fair. He won first place. I still remember how he looked standing beside his project, chest puffed with pride, eyes searching until they found me. His triumph felt like mine too. I don't need Dad to be proud, Thomas said afterward. I have Claire. I couldn't have known then that the very bond I cherished would one day be used against me. That the brother who once couldn't reach the sky without my push would one day let me fall without reaching back. During college, while my classmates built friendships and memories, I split my time between classes and Thomas's projects. I didn't see it as sacrifice. It was investment in our shared future. I was in my final semester when Thomas called at 3 a.m., his voice electric with excitement. Claire, I've got it. The thing that's going to change everything. That weekend, he unveiled his creation. A revolutionary energy storage system that could transform how we power electronics. This wasn't just brilliant, it was marketable. We need to patent this immediately, I said, and find investors. His face fell. The patent alone will cost thousands. Then there's development, testing. I thought about my job offer from Anderson Consulting, the prestigious firm that had recruited me. The starting salary was impressive, the benefits excellent, the future secure. I also thought about my brother who had fought against a system not designed for minds like his, who had endured ridicule but never surrendered his dreams. I'll help you, I said without hesitation. We'll figure it out together. What followed was intense sacrifice and exhilarating progress. I declined Anderson, taking a flexible marketing job that paid far less but gave me time to help Thomas develop his business plan. We called it NovaTech Energy Solutions, my suggestion. Thomas was the inventor. I became everything else. Business manager, marketing department, administrative assistant, fundraiser. Our initial funding came from my savings, every dollar I'd set aside during college. It wasn't nearly enough, but it was a start. 6 months in, with resources dwindling, I made the hardest decision. Selling our childhood home. Our last connection to our mother. Are you sure? Thomas asked as we watched the moving truck pull away. It's just a house, I said, though my heart ached at the sight of the empty porch where our mother once sat. What matters is what we're building. We moved into a small apartment and worked 18-hour days. I learned to function on 4 hours of sleep, to stretch dollars until they screamed, to sound confident to potential investors despite our nearly empty bank account. 14 months after we began came the watershed moment. A venture capital firm offered $1.5 million for a 25% stake in NovaTech. The night after signing, we splurged on Thai takeout, our first indulgence in over a year. To NovaTech, Thomas toasted, and to the best sister anyone could ask for. I clinked my glass against his. To believing in you, the best decision I ever made. If only I had known that the success we celebrated would eventually tear us apart, that the brother raising his glass would one day raise his voice instead, that our shared dream would become my nightmare. The first 2 years after funding were a whirlwind of growth. NovaTech secured major patents and partnerships. Thomas became the face of the company, featured in Innovation Monthly as one of the 30 under 30 inventors to watch. You should have an official title, he told me one evening. You're doing the work of a CEO. You're the founder, I reminded him. Co-founder, he corrected. We built this together. We updated the company documents, making me officially the Chief Operating Officer. Looking back, I wonder if that was the last truly unselfish thing my brother ever did for me. The changes were subtle at first, so gradual I barely noticed them happening. Thomas began attending industry events without me, making decisions without consulting me, taking meetings with investors and not sharing the details afterward. It was just technical stuff, he would say when I asked. Nothing you need to worry about. I told myself it was natural. His confidence was growing, and he was coming into his own as a business leader. Wasn't this what I had wanted? For Thomas to stand tall, to be recognized for his brilliance, to no longer need my protection and advocacy? Still, something felt off. The brother who had once shared everything with me was becoming increasingly guarded. The team meetings where we had once presented a united front were now dominated by Thomas's voice, with mine relegated to the background. Then came the Westlake deal, a potential partnership with one of the largest consumer electronics companies in the country. If it went through, NovaTech would provide battery technology for a new line of portable devices, putting our innovation in millions of homes. I spent weeks preparing the proposal, coordinating with our legal team, running financial projections. The night before the presentation, Thomas and I stayed late at the office, fine-tuning our approach. I think I should handle this one alone, he said casually as we gathered our materials. I looked up, startled. What do you mean? The Westlake executives respond better to technical expertise. They want to hear from the inventor, not the business side. I've been working on this deal from the beginning, I pointed out. I know all the details, the negotiation points, the market analysis. And you've done great work, he assured me, his tone almost patronizing. But this is a technical partnership at its core. Trust me on this, Claire. The old Thomas would have valued my input, would have recognized that our strength lay in our combined approach. This new Thomas, confident, ambitious, increasingly distant, saw me as an accessory to his vision rather than an equal partner. I should have pushed back harder. I should have insisted on being in that room. But some part of me was still the big sister who wanted to see her brother succeed, who measured her worth by his achievements. Okay, I conceded, but we should review your talking points one more time. The Westlake deal went through, bigger than we had anticipated. NovaTech was suddenly on a trajectory toward becoming a major player in the energy storage sector. Our valuation tripled overnight. Acquisition offers began coming in. Thomas was featured in Business Week. He was invited to speak at technology conferences. He hired a personal assistant without consulting me. And I found myself increasingly sidelined in the company I had helped build. My emails to staff were now countered by directives from Thomas. My suggestions in meetings were acknowledged and then subtly dismissed. My role as COO became more ceremonial than functional. Things are moving fast, Thomas would say when I tried to discuss the shift in our dynamic. We have to adapt. What he meant, I eventually realized, was that I had to adapt to his new vision of NovaTech, to his new vision of himself, to my diminishing place in both. The final straw came during an interview with Tech Innovator magazine. The journalist had come to our offices to profile NovaTech's meteoric rise in the industry. I sat beside Thomas, ready to share the story of our journey, the sacrifices, the challenges, the partnership that had made it all possible. So, Thomas, the journalist began, tell me about how you founded NovaTech. What followed was a narrative I barely recognized. In Thomas's telling, NovaTech was the product of his singular vision and determination. He spoke of bringing on his sister to help with the administrative side. After securing initial investment, he described making tough decisions early on, taking calculated risks with his own resources. There was no mention of my depleted savings account, no acknowledgement of the home I had sold to fund his dream, no recognition of the career I had abandoned or the countless hours I had invested. I sat frozen, a smile plastered on my face, as my brother systematically erased my contributions to our shared success. When the journalist turned to me, almost as an afterthought, my throat felt tight with unshed tears. Claire, as COO, what has it been like working with your brother on this venture? 1,000 responses flashed through my mind. I could correct the record, assert my role as co-founder, demand recognition for my sacrifices. I could expose the growing gap between the public image of NovaTech and the reality I experienced daily. Instead, I heard myself say, "It's been incredible watching Thomas's vision come to life. I'm just grateful to be part of the journey." Thomas beamed at me, relieved and perhaps a little triumphant. The journalist nodded approvingly, jotting down my words. Words that further cemented the narrative Thomas was creating. A narrative in which I was a supporting character rather than a co-author. That night, alone in my apartment, I cried for the first time since our mother's funeral, not just for myself, but for the brother I had known, the boy who had once told me he didn't need his father's approval because he had mine, the young man who had insisted we were building something together. Something had changed in Thomas, something fundamental. Success, which I had always believed would be our shared reward, had become a wedge driving us apart. The more NovaTech achieved, the more Thomas seemed to need to claim those achievements as his alone. I told myself it was just a phase, that he was adjusting to his new public persona, that eventually he would remember who had stood beside him when no one else believed. I told myself to be patient, to focus on the company's success rather than my wounded pride. What I didn't tell myself, what I couldn't bear to acknowledge, was that I was losing my brother to the very dream I had sacrificed everything to help him achieve. Challenge the narrative he was creating. There would be consequences. The board members he had cultivated would back him. The executives he had personally hired would support him. It would be his word against mine, and he now held all the power. The remainder of the dinner passed in strained small talk. Thomas left immediately after dessert, claiming an early meeting the next day. At the door, he hesitated briefly. "I do value you, Claire," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I hope you know that." After he left, I stood in my kitchen surrounded by the dishes from our meal, the remnants of my attempt to reconnect with the brother I had known. The lasagna pan still held the corner piece Thomas had always favored as a child. The wine glasses bore the imprints of our lips, all evidence of a shared moment that had failed to bridge the growing chasm between us. I cried that night, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the very core of my being. I cried for the little boy who had needed me to push him higher on the swing. I cried for the young man who had once insisted we were building a dream together. I cried for the brother I had lost to ambition and success. And I cried for myself, for the woman who had given everything to someone who now viewed her as dispensable. The next morning, I woke with swollen eyes and a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Melissa's question echoed in my mind. "What do you want, Claire?" For the first time in years, I allowed myself to truly consider my own desires, separate from Thomas's needs or NovaTech's growth. I wanted recognition for my contributions. I wanted respect as a professional and as a person. I wanted relationships based on mutual appreciation rather than utility.